Hey, howdy, hey, and welcome back to another episode of Regenerative Farming News. I'm your host, Heather Heinrichs, a former journalist turned farmer and passionate advocate for regenerative farming. This week, I am excited to share that Regenerative Farming News is now available on YouTube. If you'd rather listen while scrolling through videos or want an easy way to share episodes with friends and family, you can now find the show there. The same prairie stories, farmer voices, and regenerative insights, just on a new platform to make it even easier to tune in. And on today's episode, we're taking a closer look at something that may not grab headlines every day, but it might be able to help transform your farm. How to access funding to kickstart regenerative practices like cover crops. If you've been thinking about trying cover crops but worried about the costs, there are programs right here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba designed to help. These supports can cover things like seed, custom seeding costs, and even some equipment modifications, easing that first step into practices that protect your soil and strengthen your farm. In today's episode, we'll walk through what funding is available, how the programs work, and what producers need to keep in mind before applying. We'll also dig into the tools that make it possible, like no-till drills that conserve moisture and protect the soil structure, and talk about why regenerative farming is not just about agronomy, but about peace of mind. I'll share voices from prairie farmers who've told me in their own words how regenerative practices have reduced their stress, improved their bottom line, and even brought the next generation back into farming. I don't have a guest interview for you this week, and I wanted to be upfront about why. This podcast is something I create in my spare time on top of my job, family, and everything else that life throws my way. And this week, I just needed a little break. I'll be back with more great conversations next week. But in the meantime, I still wanted to bring you some useful stories and updates from the world of regenerative agriculture. Thanks for understanding, and thanks for being here with me each week. So, whether you're curious about cover crops or wondering if a no-till drill is worth the investment, or you're just looking for a little more peace of mind in your own operation, today's episode has something for you. This week, I did some research into funding that's available right now for prairie producers to help pay for regenerative practices. These programs are here to support changes that improve soil health, reduce emissions, and make farms more resilient for the long haul. The Federal On-Farm Climate Action Fund, or OFCAF, has been extended until 2028. And it's being delivered by groups like Results-Driven Agriculture Research in Alberta, the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds, the Manitoba Association of Watersheds, and the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association. You may remember one of my earlier interviews with Steve Kenyon, who does regenerative custom grazing in northern Alberta. He is a board member of the Results-Driven Agriculture Research Group. The funding available through these groups and through the OFCAF focuses on three main practices: cover cropping, rotational grazing, and nitrogen management. Let's start with cover crops. These are plants that you seed between or after your main crops. They usually aren't harvested. Their main purpose is to work for your soil. They protect against erosion, improve structure, lock in nutrients, and keep living roots in the ground as long as possible. They help with weed suppression, feed soil biology, build organic matter, and even cut greenhouse gas emissions. Think of them as an investment that pays back in healthier soil and stronger crops down the road. Under OFCAF, farmers can get reimbursed for seed costs and planting costs, whether that's custom seeding, renting equipment, or interseeding into a standing crop. There are some conditions. The cover crop must be seeded by September 15th, so it has time to establish, and you need to have at least 6 inches of growth over the winter. And it must be a new practice on that field. You won't get funding for using a cover crop on a field that has previously had cover crops. For producers who couldn't seed a fall cover crop this year, remember, the program runs until 2028, so there's time to plan ahead and line up projects for next season, especially if you're thinking about planting a cover crop in conjunction with any of your cash crops. You can get started on your application this fall or winter before you get too busy with seeding in the spring. Now let's talk about rotational grazing. This is one of the most exciting areas of OFCAF support because it speaks directly to livestock producers. Rotational grazing is all about managing when and where animals graze and giving plants enough time to rest and recover. Done properly, it leads to healthier pastures, stronger root systems, better water infiltration, and more productivity per acre. This is crucial for pasture productivity. When you put your cows out on a pasture and let them graze wherever they want for weeks or months at a time, you're damaging the grass and the soil. Cattle are not smart enough to let the plants recover. You have to control where your animals graze so that the plants can rest and only allow them to come back when the pasture is ready. The funding here can cover a lot of practical infrastructure, like fencing, cross-fencing, portable or permanent water systems, and even some pasture improvements if they're tied to your grazing plan, which you also need. You have to develop a grazing plan with an agrologist. For cattle producers especially, this can mean less reliance on buying feed, healthier forage stands, and more flexibility when weather throws you a curveball. In dry years, those rested pastures hold on longer, and in wet years, they can absorb more. That's resilience you can feel in your bottom line. And finally, there's nitrogen management. Fertilizer is one of the biggest expenses on most farms, and it's also a major source of emissions. The idea here is to use nitrogen more strategically so you can get the same or better yields with fewer losses. That might mean soil testing, switching to enhanced efficiency fertilizers, side banding or mid-row banding, using precision equipment, or even just improving your record keeping so you know what's really working. OFCAF provides funding to help cover these kinds of changes. The payoff is lower costs, more efficient nutrient use, and less risk of over-application, which benefits both the farmer and the environment. In order to qualify, you need to be an active producer with at least $25,000 in gross farm income. You also need to work with a professional agrologist or a certified crop advisor to develop what's called a Beneficial Management Practices Action Plan, or BMP Action Plan. That plan spells out your project, the fields, the costs, the methods, and it's required before you begin. Projects must be pre-approved. If you seed or buy equipment before your plan is signed off, those costs won't count. The minimum project size is $2,500. You'll need to provide some detailed records like aerial maps of your fields, GPS stamped before and after photos of cover crops, and full receipts to show for every eligible expense. OFCAF is a reimbursement program, so you pay up front and then apply to have 85% of your costs reimbursed. The maximum payout per farm across all BMPs, cover crops, grazing, and nitrogen combined, is $75,000 between now and 2028. So what does this mean for you as a farmer or rancher? It means that if you've been thinking about making changes, trying a cover crop blend, setting up a cross-fencing system, or tightening up your fertilizer management, you don't have to do it alone. These programs exist to reduce the financial barrier and lower the risk. If you're already thinking about starting some regenerative practices, you might as well let the government help pay for it. The money is there, earmarked for exactly these kinds of changes. Waiting doesn't save you anything, but planning ahead, getting pre-approval, and documenting your practices can put real dollars back in your pocket. Think about what that could mean on your farm. 85% of your seed and seeding costs reimbursed for a new cover crop mix, funding to put in water systems that make rotational grazing less work and more effective, support to fine-tune nitrogen so you're not bleeding money on inputs that aren't paying you back. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, this sounds like a lot of paperwork. And yes, there are forms to fill out, photos to take, and receipts to keep. But here's the thing. That small headache is worth it. A couple of hours with a crop advisor and a bit of record keeping could mean tens of thousands of dollars back in your pocket. If you're serious about trying regenerative practices anyway, why not let the government cover most of the cost? A little effort now can translate into big savings later, and that's money that you can reinvest into your farm instead of watching it disappear into input bills. Cover crops mean healthier soils and better water retention. Rotational grazing means stronger pastures, healthier herds, and less daily stress. Smarter nitrogen use means healthier margins and more predictability. Together, these BMPs build resilience into your farm, and resilience is the best stress relief there is. So, don't leave this opportunity untouched. If you're curious about cover crops, if you've thought about fencing or grazing, or if you're looking to cut back on your fertilizer costs, now is the time to act. Get your plan made, get it approved, line up your advisors, and get started. Because this funding can make the difference between wishing you could try something and actually doing it. And that's one more way that prairie farmers can make climate-smart farming pay off. One of the most expensive tools on the farm is the seeder. This week, I found a Western Producer article that looks at ways prairie farmers are using their seed drill to keep moisture in the soil. No-till equipment makes it possible to conserve water, protect soil structure, and build organic matter year after year. When we talk about soil structure, what we really mean is the arrangement of soil particles, pore spaces, and organic matter. A well-structured soil acts like a sponge. It soaks up rain when it comes because it has the room to hold it, and it holds the water for when plants need it later. But every time we disturb the soil with heavy tillage, that structure collapses, organic matter is exposed to oxygen and burns off as carbon dioxide, and the sponge effect weakens. That's why minimizing disturbance is so important in regenerative agriculture. No-till drills and seeders are important tools that allow farmers to put that principle into practice. Instead of ripping and turning over the soil, disc openers slice a narrow seed slot through residue and place the seed at the right depth and close the trench with very little disruption. Machines like Coulter drills, double disc openers, or low disturbance shank systems are designed to handle heavy stubble, cut through residue cleanly, and leave most of the soil surface protected. The benefit is twofold. You save the moisture that's already in the ground, and you give your soil biology the stability that it needs to keep building organic matter. And it's the organic matter itself that is so crucial. It is the long-term water storage. Every 1% increase in organic matter allows the soil to hold thousands more gallons of water per acre. That's why farmers who've been in continuous no-till for years often notice their land can handle dry spells better. It doesn't crust, it doesn't blow, and it keeps feeding crops longer into the summer. Residue management is another key piece. When no-till drills can seed directly into stubble without plugging, farmers can leave that protective mat on top. That residue shades the soil, slows evaporation, and keeps the soil environment stable for roots and microbes. And if you're seeding a cover crop or fall cereal into that residue, you're also setting yourself up to catch more snow through the winter because you're not knocking down everything that's standing. The standing stubble works like a net, holding the snow in place and giving you that extra moisture for stored up spring germination. So when we look at moisture conservation in prairie farming, it isn't just about the weather. It's about the choices we make with our equipment. By using drills and openers that protect soil structure and leave organic matter intact, and by keeping residue tall and undisturbed going into winter, farmers are creating a system where every millimeter of rain and every inch of snow gets captured and held instead of evaporated. If you haven't thought about replacing your old seeder with a no-till drill, now is the time to seriously consider it. The technology has come a long way. The agronomic benefits are clear, and in many cases, there's funding support available. Programs like the OFCAF in Alberta and across the prairies includes cost shares for equipment modifications and new practices. That means you may not be on the hook for the full cost if you're upgrading to support soil health and climate-smart farming. The takeaway is simple. No-till equipment is more than just a seeding tool, it's a soil building tool. It lets us conserve water, grow organic matter, and protect the natural architecture of our soils. And in the long run, that means healthier crops, stronger farms, and a more resilient prairie landscape. Today, I also want to talk about something that I saw recently on a farming website that made me stop and think. It was an ad for a new GMO canola variety. The ad showed a farmer stretched out, relaxing on a beach holiday with nothing but a bag of canola seed beside him. The message was clear. Plant our crop, spray the inputs we tell you to, and you can rest easy knowing your farm is taken care of. Now, I understand the pitch. Seed companies are selling convenience and certainty. They want you to believe that their package of genetics and inputs will take the stress out of farming. But let's be honest, has relying on high input systems really brought us peace of mind? When you're tied to expensive seed royalties, chemical packages, fertilizer costs, and the volatility of global markets, does that feel like freedom? Or does it feel more like dependence? Compare that image with the peace of mind regenerative farmers describe. Instead of being locked into high input bills, they're reducing costs by building soil fertility through cover crops and livestock integration. Instead of worrying about resistance to the next herbicide, they're growing diversity that naturally suppresses weeds. Instead of being at the mercy of weather every single season, they're improving their soils so each millimeter of rain sinks in and stays there. That's real resilience. The big companies know that farmers are stressed. They know that we want certainty. And they're selling it in glossy ads with beach chairs and vacations. But the truth is, long-term peace of mind doesn't come in a bag. It comes from healthy soils, diverse rotations, livestock on the land, and practices that make your farm less dependent on the forces that you just can't control. So the next time you see one of those ads, ask yourself, who really benefits from this promise of peace? The farmer or the company selling the seed? And remember, regenerative agriculture offers a very different picture of peace. It may not come with a glossy vacation photo, but it looks a lot like thriving soil, healthier crops, and the satisfaction of knowing that your farm is truly built to last. And it's not just me saying these things about regenerative agriculture. Let's look back at some of the interviews that I've done recently and remember these words that we've heard right from the farmers themselves. If there's one thing that keeps coming up in my interviews with farmers and ranchers across the prairies, it's this. Regenerative agriculture doesn't just transform the soil. It transforms the farmer, the family, and the way we live on the land. Stress in farming is something we don't talk about enough. It's heavy, it's constant, and for too many, it's isolating. Rising input costs, unpredictable weather, global market swings, equipment breakdowns, it all adds up. And when I look at the surveys, they back up what I've been hearing in my conversations. More than half of Canadian farmers fit the criteria for depression. Nearly 3/4 for anxiety. That's staggering. But what I've also seen firsthand is that farmers who take steps toward regenerative agriculture tell me that their stress goes down significantly. Let me share a few of their voices. Take Kevin Elmy, for example, that I just interviewed last week. Kevin shared with me just how on edge he used to be farming conventionally. He said, quote, "Back when I was chasing yield with high input farming, I was so stressed I'd jump at any sound outside thinking it might be hail hitting the house. That's no way to live." End quote. Imagine living like that, always braced for disaster, one storm away from losing everything you've invested in a crop. Then Kevin shifted his focus from less on yield per acre to more on profit per acre, leaning into soil biology instead of chemicals. He told me, quote, "When you shift your focus from yield per acre to profit per acre, you open the door to real financial freedom. By building soil health and leaning on biology instead of chemicals, farmers can drastically reduce or even eliminate costly inputs. That gives power back to the farmer." End quote. That idea, giving power back to the farmer, is what makes the stress begin to lift. That phrase, power back to the farmer, really sticks with me because so much of modern agriculture has left farmers feeling powerless. Powerless against the price of fertilizer, powerless against seed royalties, powerless against weeds that develop resistance faster than chemicals can keep up. But when you're no longer locked into that treadmill, when biology starts to do the work, when you spend less and actually keep more in your pocket, the power shifts back to where it belongs, to the farm family making the decisions. Then there's Calvin Gaviline from McCord, Saskatchewan. Calvin's story is powerful because it's not just about numbers, it's about quality of life as well. He told me about when he first started using cover crops and planned grazing. It was so effective that, for the first time, he didn't have to fire up the tractor every day. Quote, "For the first time in my life, I never started a tractor for the majority of the winter. The cows grazed happily, contented, and in great shape, without the usual feed runs and equipment wear and tear. That kind of downtime transformed our winter and our lives. Not spending hours feeding every day meant more time with my family during those long, dark months. More peace, less stress." End quote. That's a vision of farming we don't often see in glossy ads. Not a vacation on a beach somewhere, but a quiet winter morning at home, sitting down with your kids for breakfast instead of racing to thaw equipment. That's real peace. And here's something that Calvin shared that I think is equally important. He said regenerative agriculture has drawn his kids back into farming. They saw the changes happening on the land, the diversity in the fields, the cattle grazing on lush cover crops, the resilience through dry spells, and it sparked their interest. He said it gave them hope that farming could be different than the grind they'd grown up watching, that it could be a future worth stepping into. How many conventional farms are seeing the next generation walk away because they don't want that stress, because they don't see that farming is worth everything that comes with it? Regeneration, in Calvin's case, flipped that around. It gave his family a reason to re-engage. Chris Beaudry from Rose Valley, Saskatchewan, told me a story that hit from another angle. He said, quote, "I was sick and tired of being sick and tired during spraying season. People told me, that's just what it is. You're just not supposed to feel good. But I thought, what are we doing to our food if it's making me sick?" End quote. That realization pushed him toward change. When he planted his first cover crop blend, the difference was night and day. Before, barley barely grew ankle high. After, sunflowers, sweet clover, and radishes towered 4 to 7 feet tall. Quote, "It was like the soil was alive again," end quote, he told me. That was his light bulb moment. But Chris also shared a financial story. He stopped looking only at yield maps and started drawing up profit maps. Just like Kevin Elmy, when he saw acres that were always red, always losing money, he stopped pouring inputs into them. Instead, Chris turned them into hay ground or planted pollinator mixes. And here's the part that really made me smile. Chris said, quote, "My accountant actually asked me one day, 'How are you reducing your debt so quickly?' And I told him straight up, 'It's because we stopped throwing money at acres that were never paying us back. Once we put those acres into hay or pollinator mixes, the red numbers on the books disappeared. That change gave me breathing room I hadn't felt in years." End quote. That's the kind of story that hits both head and heart. It's not just about soil biology, but about financial biology, healing the balance sheet as well as the land. That kind of breathing room, that is real stress relief. And it's not just these three voices. Research backs them up. A survey from the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition found that farmers using regenerative practices scored higher on satisfaction with their quality of life, reported more resilience during droughts and floods, and were more confident in their profitability. McKinsey reported similar results in the Corn Belt. Regenerative farmers saw reduced input costs and more stable net returns, which meant fewer financial roller coasters. USDA soil scientists have measured higher organic matter, better infiltration, and less erosion on regenerative fields. And all of that translates into fewer headaches, fewer emergencies, and fewer sleepless nights. So let's put this all together. Kevin tells us that regenerative practices give power back to the farmer. Calvin shows us they can give time back to the family and even bring kids back to the farm. Chris proves they can give breathing room back to the balance sheet, enough even for an accountant to notice. Add it all up, and what do you get? Less stress, more control, more hope. So if you're listening today and you're worn out, I want you to picture this. Imagine telling your kids you'll be home more this winter because the cows are grazing themselves. Imagine walking into your accountant's office and hearing them say, "How are you paying down your debt so quickly?" Imagine watching your kids get excited about farming because they see a system that feels alive, sustainable, and worth inheriting. That's what regenerative agriculture offers. It's not about perfection. It's not about never worrying again. Farming will always be hard work, but it's about shifting the stress from things you can't control to the things you can. It's about taking power back, one field, one practice, one season at a time. Because at the end of the day, regenerative farming isn't just a fad about soil health. It's about healthier soils, healthier farmers, healthier families, and healthier futures. And that, to me, is worth more than any bag of seed promising you peace of mind. And I just wanted to tag into the show here this week a quick reminder of upcoming events. First, the Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association's Regenerative Agriculture Conference is happening November 12th and 13th in Brandon, Manitoba. The theme this year is Enriching Land, Lives, and Livelihoods. This conference will feature an incredible lineup of keynote speakers. Rick Clark, a fifth-generation farmer from Indiana and a leader in large-scale regenerative practices. Michael Ferguson from Melfort, Saskatchewan, who focuses on shifting perspectives to spark lasting change on farms. Rob Wonder of Foam Lake, Saskatchewan, who shares his experience integrating crops and livestock. Kimberly Cornish of the Food Water Wellness Foundation, who's been pioneering soil mapping and ecosystem service markets. And Tom Krowick, a researcher and author known for making ranching practices more accessible and practical. And Kevin Elmy, who I just recently interviewed on the podcast, will also be there as a panelist. Add in breakout sessions, a bustling trade show, and even a free kids program, and this will be a must-attend event. Then, looking ahead to the new year, Holistic Management Canada is hosting its annual conference February 6th to 8th in Taber, Alberta. This gathering is family-friendly and brings together farmers, ranchers, and land managers of all ages to share tools for holistic decision-making, grazing strategies, soil health, and community building. Although the speaker lineup is not yet up on the website, last year's featured keynote was none other than Gabe Brown, the North Dakota rancher whose story has inspired thousands around the world to adopt regenerative practices. These conferences are an incredible way to recharge, network, and bring fresh ideas back to your farm. If you can make it to Brandon, Manitoba, or in November, or Taber, Alberta in February, you'll be surrounded by people who are passionate about regenerative agriculture and eager to share their knowledge. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Regenerative Farming News. I'm Heather Heinrichs. Thanks for tuning in and sharing part of your day with me. If today's episode got you thinking about cover crops, rotational grazing, or nitrogen management, remember, a little bit of paperwork now can unlock thousands of dollars in funding. And that support can make the difference between just thinking about regenerative practices and actually putting them in the ground. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an update, and share this episode with a neighbor or a friend who might benefit. I'd also love to hear what you're trying on your farm and what results you're seeing. Your stories help keep this community growing. Together, we can grow healthier soil, stronger farms, and a more resilient future.